Chapter 5. Blamed if I think much of this bay, old Pats, Ezra grouched, jogging off to Elcaster with his companions in the clear evening light. Why not? Connor countered promptly. He wanted a ranch and he got one, a good one. But Ezra wasn't convinced. It's this Hanlon. I ain't partial to nothing about him. If it wasn't you that let it out about Pat heading this way with money on him, it must have been him. It seems to me with the deal closed, Chad's been shuffled out of the deck for keeps, Connor observed. It seems so. Ezra was gloomy. With Hannon, he's shady. Ain't nothing permanent about his kind. He'll try and fleece Stevens one way or another. But how can he do that? Still around, ain't he? Ezra pointed out sharply. No telling what he's up to. And what can we do then? Chip countered. Just wait, I guess. It was all the big head had to offer at this time, but his tone was foreboding. Sunset light faded off the ragged crest of the San Canalinas west across the valley. The limpid, apple-green sky slowly dulled. In a mile or two beyond Casbella, a combination store and saloon standing forlornly alongside the freight trail, they pulled out into the dusty mesquite and camped near the shallow San Padres. The fire felt good in a cool night breeze that sprang up. Flying sparks starred the darkness. By the way, where are we going? Chip asked as they enjoyed a smoke before the blaze. Sam looked at Ezra, and for a long moment there was no answer forthcoming. Well, the truth is, Connor, we're in something of a pickle, Salone admitted at last, scratching his stubbled jaw. Oh, yeah? Chip prompted. We told Stevens that there was a herd of Morgan strain horses waiting for us here in Sulphur Springs Valley. Sam stopped there. And? We could go back and say we turned the stuff down, but, Sam proceeded with some puzzlement, I really did want some horses, though. Connor looked at him. You mean there isn't actually a bunch waiting there? It was just a bluff? We had to have some reason for riding down this here with Pat, Ezra grouched. Connor's grin gave way to a thoughtful expression. It was long before he spoke, gazing into the fire. Well, funny thing should turn out in this way. It happens, he said with a studied casualness, that I can lead you to your pick of right handsome stuff. It's Barb stock, though. It's not Morgan. Spanish stuff from down in Mexico. They looked up hopefully. Well, sounds like a chance. Pretty fair horses, I guess? Sam asked. Good? Man, those Arabs run Morgan horses off its legs, exclaimed Chip. Oh, yeah? Sam took all the horse talk with a grain of salt till he had had his look. What are they? Well, they're mostly all roans with the occasional bay in it, was the reply. Well, even Ezra began to show interest. This is beginning to sound like something after all. How'd you know about it, Connor? You're no horse trader. A curious expression overspread the puncher's face, and he hesitated. Well, the truth is, this particular bunch is a herd that Chad Hanlon's been dickering for. It's why he wanted money from the sale of his ranch. Figures to take a fat profit on the horses at the mines around the Bonanza Belt. They've always been looking for good horse stock. Sam began to laugh, his eyes wrinkling shrewdly. Like that, eh? Well, as it stands, Helen has no string on those horses, Connor averted stoutly. There's anyone to buy, and besides, I owe him something. I'm only too anxious to whisker a bargain out from under his nose and make him like it. Wouldn't hurt my feelings none neither, admitted Ezra gruffly. If he wasn't behind that business there in Camaro, we'll just say I don't like him anyhow. But Sam proved more cautious, looking the proposal over from different angles. Is the deal square? We ain't looking for no snide pickings, he warned bluntly. Chip's reply was confident. Chad wouldn't touch anything but a straight deal. He ain't got the nerve, Sloan. Both the partners were too anxious for all to go off well to argue the matter much over. Well, we better get over there and make our grab if the horses is what we want, Sam said finally. Hanlon's got the money now for the ranch, and he won't be wasting any time. Don't worry. Chad never yet broke his back when it comes to work, Connor retorted cheerfully. Nevertheless, Sam saw to it that they rolled out the next morning at the first streaks of dawn. After grabbing a hasty bite, they threw their equipment together and set off. Where is this bargain? Ezra asked, when he had thawed out sufficiently to feel himself again. Just where you told Stevens. It's in Sulphur Springs Valley, chuckled Connor. It's a small ranch above the Wilcox, Ezra. We'll be there tonight. We can make ourselves a dicker and drive back across the hills with no need of ever mentioning the circumstances to Pat. With their own reasons for wishing Stevens to believe all had gone according to schedule, Ezra and Sam found no flaw in this program. Riding steadily, they swung east around the base of the Winchester Mountains some distance above Benson. The gray world of mesquite, cut up by washes, extended in every direction. Connor led the way confidently, and he managed for the most part to avoid the few scattered dry ranches they saw, their rusty pump towers standing starkly against the hazy sky. Topping a low, brushy ridge in the afternoon, Chip pointed out a grim smudge of smoke hovering some miles away to the southwest. Wilcox on the SP, it's a loading point, he said. The ranch we're going to is a few miles north of it. An hour later, they jogged towards a weathered group of ranch buildings more or less concealed below a circular rock basin ridge. Seen over the endless brush, the place looked parched and uninviting, but a considerable number of horses could be seen circling and milling in the large corrals. Barbell, huh? Ezra read the brand that was burned in a board nailed to a post. Hey, look at them horses, Sam seconded, craning to see through the corral bars. Man, there's some choice stuff in there. They had their look at the horses before moving on. The animals were clean cut and spirited, built on the trim lines which spelled speed and stamina, and there did not appear to be an elky rotted hoof in the whole bunch. The partners were hard put to contain their exuberance over the prospect of possessing themselves of such superior stock. Pushing the transaction to a conclusion seemed only a minor detail. There were a couple of men standing in the ranch yard as the trio approached. Bearded and watchful, they waited in silence. Connor pushed to the fore. Well, just let me do the talking, he muttered, and he rode into the yard boldly. Howdy, Baxley, he drawled. Well, here we are. The barbell owner vouchsafed a guarded nod. Chip, in an unbearably audible murmur. Who those gents? All them? Connor turned. Well, that's Sam and Ezra. Are along to do the pickings backs. So both old hands at it, as the feller says. The rancher stood unmoving. Well, I don't know. Did Chad agree to up his figure a little? We didn't see eye to eye last week. I reckon we can make it satisfy you. Connor nodded easily. Baxley turned towards the corrals then, and taking Chip for an anvil hand, he obviously believed the latter to be dealing in Chad Hanlon's name. The puncher was careful to say nothing that might disillusion him, and Sam and Ezra maintained a matter-of-fact silence. Well, how many heads you taking? The rancher inquired. Chip shot a glance at Sam. It was manifestly an invitation to speak up. We're prepared to pass on 100, give or take a head or two in one way or another, Sloan announced gruffly. Baxley expressed surprise. Reckon Chad's got a pretty fair price for his place, he suggested. Will he be wanting more horses later on? But Ezra and Sam were pushing in the direction of the corrals, and now that they were this close to the horse herd, so plainly far above standard, they were impatient to make their selection and get away. Connor delayed to satisfy the rancher's rambling curiosity while the two set about their task. They found no difficulty in choosing horses which came up to specifications. In fact, looking over the stuff they had cut out and then noting its quality, Sam began to question seriously whether they were carrying a sum sufficient to foot the bill. Chip helped them complete their cut. A count was made. They'd selected 93 horses, and still many excellent head remained. Sam shook his head, sighing. "Keep this up, and we'll have twice the number we can handle," he muttered to Connor. "You better start your dicker, boy, and keep that figure down. But we won't let such stock go over $1 or $2, he cautioned hurriedly. Chip joined Baxley outside the corral. "Well, just what figure did Chad mention last?" They heard him question the rancher. There was a drawn-out discussion in low tones, and Connor at length turned to Salone. "Bax reckons $10 a head is fair. Do you think Hanlon would stand for that price?" he called. Pausing for effect, Sam could scarcely conceal his elation. It was so far under any price he'd expected to hear it seemed ridiculously low. He had been striving, in the fact, to reconcile himself to an amount again half as large. "Well, if we buy him for that price, what can he do?" he returned with simulated indifference. "Shall we call her a deal, then?" Chip persisted, as if there were some question about it. "I'd say so." "It'll have to be cash, though," Baxley spoke up flatly. "I ain't accepting none of Hanlon's notes, not or anything else for that matter." "No notes," Sam agreed in his laziest drawl. "I'm carrying the cash if I can get it out." Despite his words, he lost no time in snaking the money belt from under his shirt and counting out the full amount. He handed it over. "We'll just take your bill of sale covering this lot," he said. "I don't want no argument when I turn the horses over." Baxley would have protested, but he had abruptly changed his mind. "I've been needling Chad about that money," he said. "Reckon I'll have to keep him happy." Using the back of a crumpled envelope, he wrote out the required form. If his signature was well nigh indecipherable, Salone was satisfied and tucked the paper away. "Let's get them critters lined out, and let's make for some tracks," he said briskly. The corral was opened, and the lively roans streamed out with a rush. The ease with which the herd was started off told the partners the horses had not been on this range long enough to be accustomed to it. They had already studied the foreign-appearing brands. A dozen questions started forming in their minds. Chip pointed out a course across the hills with which to lead them to the Anvil Range, and they were scarcely a mile beyond the barbell when 3 mounted men were seen to be angling across the rolling slopes to intercept them. "What's this?" Ezra burst out, Connor peering keenly, doubt in his manner. "We'll soon find out." The newcomers jogged forward warily. One a hatchet-faced man with narrow, ice-blue eyes, waving authority towards the herd. His tone was challenging. "Where'd you get them horses?" Sam pushed out to meet him, fully as cold as men. "And who are you, friend?" he tossed back tightly. "There's wet stuff in that bunch," the other charged, indicating the strange-looking Mexican brands. "If that's the bunch that Hanlon was expecting, we'll just take it off your hands." He was looking at Connor accusingly. "Nuh-uh, you just ride on about your business," Sam retorted curtly. "And keep your hands on your saddle horn like gentlemen before I get nervous," he added sharply. The stranger eyed him in sour silence. "Facing it out, are you?" he rasped. "I suppose next you'll be telling me you didn't just pick up them horses." "Sure, we bought 'em today," Sam allowed. "So what?" "Well, you ain't getting away with it," the man yelled angrily. "We was sent down to pick up that stuff, and we're taking it back." My. Sam had gone suave, his tone gently sarcastic. Well, maybe you wouldn't mind explaining how you intend to go about it? By God, we'll get 'em or we'll scatter 'em to hell and gone, broke out one of the strangers who had not previously spoken. He raked his mount into motion and he hurled it directly towards the herd, and had he reached it, the bunched horses would have almost certainly been stampeded far and wide. The treacherous maneuver never succeeded, however. Before the horse had gone 2 full strides, a gun cracked flatly at Ezra's hip. The running horse folded as suddenly as if he had been hit at the end of a rope, his rider hurtling head first to bring up a dozen feet away, end over end. Sam's .45 was peeping over his saddle bow at the remaining 2 men. They had tightened up in the saddle, black of face, only subside with slow caution. Too bad, Sam told them with sympathy. A man will run into a snag occasionally, in spite of all he can do. Reckon a couple of ye will have to ride double. Well, Hanlon will hear about this, blast you, the spokesman ejacted, purple at the gills. He's every right to be interested, Ezra threw back roughly. Well, make sure he pays for that horse you lost, too. The fallen man stumbled up to look about dazedly. He muttered, scowled at the sight of the guns, and edged towards his companion. Sorry we couldn't do business with you, Sam drawled. Do we have to smoke you, or would you prefer your own fresh air? The dismounted man swung up behind one of his fellows, and without more words the 3 jogged off, tossing black looks over their shoulders. Chip Connor had wisely left the management of the encounter to the older men. He was busy keeping the horses bunched. His tight visage expressed relief at the final outcome. But the 3 maintained a close watch to the rear, fogging the herd upon its way as long as the strangers stayed in sight. You know any of them hombres, Chip? Sam called to the puncher at length. Connor shook his head. Not by name. I've seen 'em around, that's about it. They're a part of a bunch that hangs out at Castbella. What bunch is that? Hard cases and owl hoots on the hide, drunks and generally no goods, was the answer. Caspel isn't a healthy place to be caught at a dark night, or most any kind of night for that matter. Ezra was listening in on the exchange. Well, they know Hanlon, whoever they are, he pointed out. Chip looked at him slowly. It was plain that the puncher was being forced to revise his estimate of Chad Hanlon as time went on. His findings left him sober. Yeah, Ezra, they know Hanlon, he repeated pensively. From what I got of their talk, Chad must have sent him out to pick up this bunch of horses from Baxley. Right. And we didn't beat him up much by it. We owe you something, Chip, for hurrying us along. Sam did not mention the fact that he had had as much to do with this as anyone. Connor shook his head. I don't know, Sam. If I'm right, those birds will soon be talking to Baxley, and then that fat will be in the fire. Or maybe it already is. Sam grinned. Hanlon had a tough time getting any satisfaction out of us, he predicted. Got the horses, ain't we? He never told the feller back there you was dealing for Hanlon. If he wanted to take it that way from your talk, that's his hard luck. Chip couldn't help responding to this with a delighted chuckle. Well, we put it over, didn't we? I only hope Chad braces me about it sometime. I'll make his ears ring. They pushed up their way without delay. At times they were forced to exert themselves considerably as dry washes appeared, splitting the plain over which the herd must be maneuvered without scattering the spooky animals. Sunset found them miles from anywhere, and they pulled up for the night at a point where a barricana enabled them to rope up a corral in which the stock would be reasonably secure. They took turns standing watch. The dark hours passed quietly, and no sound disturbed the deep hush save the occasional snort of a horse or the bark of a distant coyote. During the small hours, Sam was awakened by deep slumber by a feel of a hand on his shoulder. Yeah, what is it? He mumbled, starting up. Listen. Chip, whose trick it was to stand guard, knelt down beside him with bated breath as a dull, faraway drumming came faintly to their ears from over the plain.
What would that be, Sam?
Running horses, Sloane exclaimed. He stood upright to peer into the distance, but the early moon had already been set, and they could see nothing. Somebody's crossing the range in a hurry. The drumming drew up thinly as they listened, and then finally faded. Sam returned to his blankets.
Oh, well, I'm getting too old to worry till trouble slaps me plumb in the face, was his unruffled comment as he turned over.
Morning saw them off to an early start, and long before noon the lifting shoulders of the galleros rearing to the fore told them that the anvil could not be much further along. They were passing between two wooded ridges on the anvil range an hour later, when, without any warning, a rifle shot crashed from the height. Sam hauled in, cursing under his breath. Someone was firing on them from concealment. Chip Connor straightened in the saddle, his harsh face alert.
That's Chad Hanlon, he ripped out. Dang him, he may be mad, but he ain't putting this over.
Jamming in the spurs, he burst in amongst the trees at the foot of the slope in the direction from which the shot had come. End of chapter 5.